Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are looking right at the heart of the modern American economy. And honestly, it's a landscape defined by two vastly different financial realities. On one hand, you have this incredible exponential wealth creation and asset accumulation. But on the other hand, everyday families are grappling with a relentless financial squeeze. We're going to unpack the actual architecture of this divide. We'll be digging into official data from the Federal Reserve, the Census Bureau, and the Congressional Budget Office to understand exactly why the gap between what we earn and what we own is widening so rapidly. Let's dive in.
So here is the central question of our time. Why does hard work no longer guarantee financial security? For generations, the promise was pretty simple, right? Earn a good wage, save a portion of it, and eventually you build a comfortable life. But today, the reality for so many working families is this feeling of running on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up. You work harder, you put in the overtime, yet that financial squeeze only seems to tighten. Why is it that labor alone just doesn't seem to bridge the gap anymore?
Well, the official numbers from the Congressional Budget Office reveal a genuinely jarring picture. Get this, the wealthiest 10% of families now control 60% of all U.S. wealth. Meanwhile, families in the bottom half, literally half the country, millions and millions of working people, hold just over 6%. It is a stunning, almost incomprehensible concentration of capital. And to really understand how we got here, we actually have to look past salaries and look directly at balance sheets.
Section 1. A Tale of Two Portfolios. The Reveal.
To make sense of this wealth gap, we really have to shift our narrative. It's not just about how much money people manage to scrape together and save from their paychecks. It's fundamentally about what they actually own. Economists call this portfolio heterogeneity. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but it really just means that the true dividing line in America isn't your income bracket, it's the specific types of assets sitting in your portfolio. Your long-term financial destiny is largely determined by the asset class you occupy.
Let's just compare those portfolios directly. Wealthy households systematically allocate their capital to high-yield, compounding financial assets. We're talking corporate equities, mutual funds, private businesses. In stark contrast, middle-class and lower-income families hold the vast majority of their limited net worth in non-financial assets, primarily their homes and their vehicles. The catch? These are highly illiquid, meaning you can't easily turn them into cash to buy groceries, and generally speaking, their value grows at a much slower pace compared to the stock market. Federal Reserve data shows this really stark inverse relationship. For the least wealthy households, roughly 70% of their entire net worth is tied up in their homes and cars. But as wealth increases, that reliance shrinks dramatically. Financial assets just completely take over. In fact, the top 1% hold less than 14% of their wealth in real estate. Their money is completely elsewhere, situated in vehicles designed for explosive exponential growth.
Section 2. The Compounding Asset Engine. How Wealth Multiplies. All right, this brings us to the mechanics of how wealth moves fast. Financial assets aren't just static places to park your money. They are highly dynamic engines. Corporate equities benefit from stock buybacks, dividend distributions, and rapid capital gains. This effectively creates what you could call a trickle-up economy. Because the top 20% of income earners hold roughly 87% of all corporate equities, whenever the stock market rallies, the economic benefits compound exponentially right at the very top. Passive income generates more capital, which is then immediately used to buy more assets. When these asset prices inflate, the wealthy literally feel richer, and their spending power completely dominates the broader economy. A landmark Federal Reserve study actually found that 75% of all wealth effects spending, which is essentially the extra money people spend simply because their investment portfolios went up in value, flows directly through that top quintile of earners. Their investments fuel their consumption, which in turn drives corporate profits, creating this massive closed loop of continuous enrichment.
During periods of rapid asset price inflation, kind of like the massive boom we all saw in 2021, realized capital gains hit absolute record highs. This skews national income dramatically toward the highest earners. It's basically a perpetual motion machine. Wealthy households capture these huge passive income streams, and instead of just spending them, they immediately reinvest them into additional yield-bearing assets. The engine just keeps roaring, pushing the finish line further and further away for anyone who is relying strictly on a standard paycheck.
Section 3. The Hidden Inflation Tax. Headwinds for the rest.
Now, while that asset engine accelerates for some, the rest of the economy faces these invisible structural barriers. Macroeconomic forces naturally redistribute wealth through two distinct channels. First, you have the inflation tax channel. This disproportionately penalizes lower-income households because they rely so heavily on cash and standard bank deposits. Second is the savings redistribution channel. When inflation hits, the real tangible value of money drops. This really hurts people trying to save, though. To be fair, it can occasionally benefit middle-class families who happen to be locked into long-term fixed-rate mortgage debt.
But think about the reality for the average American family. They're holding median savings of just around $5,300.
For them, inflation acts as a crushing hidden tax. In a low-rate environment, that modest bank deposit yields almost nothing, meaning it continuously loses real purchasing power every single day. The money they worked so incredibly hard to save simply buys less than it did yesterday. Meanwhile, the wealthy are heavily insulated, safely hedging their capital inside those fast-growing financial equities we were just talking about.
Section 4. The housing market squeeze, locked out of wealth. Historically, buying a home has been the absolute primary wealth-building tool for the American middle class. But today, that whole dynamic is fracturing. The modern housing market structurally rewards older, existing homeowners while aggressively pricing out younger buyers. Between 2019 and 2022 alone, median home equity skyrocketed by nearly $48,000 for existing owners. But for those on the outside looking in, they are increasingly forced into a really brutal rental market, where rising costs devour the exact discretionary income they desperately need to start investing. Their wealth-building capacity is essentially frozen in place. To put this squeeze into perspective, Census Bureau data shows that housing affordability has deteriorated to historic lows. By 2022, the median home was valued at more than 4.6 times the median family income. 4.6 times. That is a massive, towering structural barrier to entry for the average worker just trying to get a foothold in the asset economy. The traditional path to the middle class, buying a house, paying off the mortgage, building equity over time, is becoming mathematically impossible for a rapidly growing segment of the population.
Section 5. The nuance, Social Security and the middle class.
Okay, we do need to introduce some critical nuance here. While the gap in marketable assets is staggering, the total financial collapse of the bottom 50% is heavily buffered by a vital social safety net. When economists measure inequality, they often use something called the Gini coefficient. Think of it as a scale. 0 is perfect equality, and 1 is maximum inequality. If we look strictly at private wealth, inequality is extremely high. But when we factor in the accrued future value of Social Security benefits, the inequality metric drops meaningfully. Including Social Security reduces the overall wealth inequality score for families in 2022 from 0.81 down to 0.72.
For families in the bottom income quintile, Social Security isn't just a nice little supplement, it is their absolute financial pillar. It actually constitutes over half of their total assets. Without it, their net worth would practically vanish overnight. Now, while Social Security certainly doesn't reverse the massive trend of wealth concentration at the top, it acts as a crucial, evenly distributed foundation that prevents American inequality from becoming even more extreme than it already is.
Section 6. The structural reality, policy, not accident.
As we zoom out to observe this whole macroeconomic reality, we really have to look at the architecture of the system itself. The divergence we are seeing right now is not an accident, it's not a glitch. As the research clearly indicates, it is the direct consequence of specific long-term policy configurations. The compounding nature of corporate equities, the towering barriers to homeownership, the transmission of monetary policy, these all work in tandem. These mechanics consistently enable wealthy Americans to accumulate assets rapidly, while systematically locking average households into financial fragility.
Which leaves us with a genuinely profound societal question. If the true dividing line in America today is what we own rather than what we earn, how will the next generation achieve financial security? If this asset accumulation divide continues to widen unchecked, what does the future of the American middle class actually look like? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helps you understand the deep structural forces shaping the economy beneath our feet. Keep questioning and keep learning.